John Lusk here of Lusk Archery Adventures, series testing, successful hunting. Today I'm going to be testing the Simmons LANDSHARK. I've gotten quite a few requests to test this head, and I love broadheads with a really big cut. This one definitely has it. Simmons has a great reputation with trad archery, but also has made quite a following in crossover to the compound bow market. They have a great owner, and the guy that runs the company, Dave, out of Montana. I've talked to him quite a bit, learned so much from him, but I'm eager to check this head out. Let's zoom on in here, take a look at him, go through some of the design features and specifications, and then see how the LANDSHARK performs. Here's a good look at the LANDSHARK. This is a really cool design. In some ways it's simple, it's just a two-blade broadhead, but in other ways it's pretty complex and pretty unique. You see it's got this blade over shaft design to allow the overall amount of the broadhead that sticks beyond the end of the ferrule to be shorter, and that's just going to aid in flight as well as durability of the ferrule. It's got this classic Simmons concave design, but what makes this head really especially cool is its massive cutting diameter. It's 1 5/8 inches. Okay, I've never shot a fixed blade head that's over 1.5 inches in cutting diameter. That's bigger than many mechanical heads. That's pretty impressive. That's going to open up quite a wound channel. Now, this is the 135 grain model. They also make a 160 grain model. But the only difference between the two is the thickness of the blades. In the 135 grain, the thickness is 0.042, whereas in the 160 grain, the thickness is 0.050. This is a 100% steel design in both the 135 grain and the 160 grain. The ferrule is made out of a 12-11-14 steel, and then the blades are a high carbon steel, and they're brought to a Rockwell hardness of 49 to 51. Now the ferrule and the blades are fused together with a proprietary process that they consider to be extremely durable. .135 grain LANDSHARK. 200. The 135 penetrated 5.5 inches. The 160 grain penetrated 5 3/4 inches. Okay, I think this is a pretty cool little experiment here. So here's all three models of Simmons broadheads that I've tested recently. And I shot all of these through this medium of the MDF, the rubber foam mat, and the clear ballistics gel at the same time. Same bow, same arrow, same specs, everything. But you see the Mako on the left penetrated significantly more than the other two. And that's interesting because the Mako's cutting diameter is less. It's 1 1/4 inches, but it actually has more cut because of the bleeders. Its cut size is 2.125 inches, whereas the cut size of the two LANDSHARKs is just over 1.5 inches, like 1.6 something inches. And so it's interesting to see that even though it cut more tissue, it actually penetrated more deeply, even though it's an overall lighter setup. And then you see the two LANDSHARKs, and that's interesting to see too. They both have the same cut, obviously, but the one on the right is the 160 grain model. And so that extra weight, that extra 25 grains that it has there, allowed it to penetrate 1/4 of an inch more deeply. Now, I do want to know that's just in this medium. And I found that sometimes gel, it can, it has its benefits and it also has its cons. And one of the cons is the more surface area there is to a broadhead, the more it's going to stick to the gel, or the gel's going to stick to the broadhead and impede penetration. So a lot of times the longer broadheads that have a lot of surface area, they actually don't penetrate as effectively as the shorter broadheads with less surface area. Now, does that translate into a hunting situation? Who knows? Okay, I don't know exactly. Can't always tell. That's why I also do penetration tests too, where I shoot the heads into cardboard just to see how the difference is in penetrating through that medium. $300. The 135 grain model penetrated through 48 layers. Here you can see the holes that the Landshark makes. They're really nice, wide holes, more than 1.6 inches in length there. And I found that the width of a cut like that, the total diameter of a cut, affects bloodletting more than the total amount of tissue cut. Now, that's with everything equal. If depth of penetration and sharpness and shot placement, if everything is equal, the wider the cut is, the more bloodletting there's going to be, because the tissue tends to stretch. When there's already a hole that's really long or wide like this, then it tends to stretch further when the animal moves around. Whereas if it's a smaller hole or more compact hole, then it really doesn't stretch so much. And matter of fact, it has a tendency to get plugged up by tissue as well. Here's the 135 after going through the steel plate 5 times. And it held up much better than I thought it would. Wow, for having such a wide cut, man, that puts a lot of pressure on the blades there. But they held up really well. Of course, you can see some nicking and denting there. That could be sharpened out, and it spins perfectly well. Here's the Landshark 135 after the concrete. You can see overall it stayed intact and held up relatively well. The blades just bent, as you can see there. Now, what's interesting about it is the ferrule is still in great shape. The edges are still pretty sharp, and the tip is still pretty sharp, perfectly intact. There's just that slight bend to it right there. I suppose that wouldn't be that difficult to flatten out and use again. And honestly, with such a wide blade and so much exposed blade, I thought it was just going to curlicue or break, but it didn't. So what'd you think of the Landshark? Man, I got to tell you, this had performed a lot better than I thought. I mean, I knew it was going to have a good cut, but I wasn't sure how it was going to fly, and I really wasn't sure of the durability, but it exceeded my expectations in all of those areas. So check out the score sheet and see how it performed in the areas that matter to you the most, and check out my overall lusk grade. But I think this is a head worth looking at. Great job, Simmons.